So let's actually start with the good stuff first before we get to the letdown. And let's talk about that fight between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. Did it live up to the expectations after their fight of the year in 2022?
I think it did. We had yet another classic, really, didn't we? Especially when you got to the later rounds. I didn't have a problem with the scoring. And I think if you're going to shout robbery, that not you, but people in general, especially the commentary team on that day, on that evening, literally screaming robbery. Not only about that fight, but they were screaming robbery about the fight which happened at Madison Square Gardens as well. I think if you're going to do that in a close fight, you need to have really watched the fight closely, like a judge would. You need to be looking at each and every round. Who's the more effective fighter in this round? Who's the more efficient fighter? Who's catching the cleaner, more eye catching shots? You need to be looking at each round as its own fight, 10 separate fights in that sort of way. And then you need to be properly and professionally scoring it. And I scored it like that, not for enjoyment, like I was a judge. And I scored it 95 to 94 to Katie Taylor. The first three rounds for me were quite comfortable Katie Taylor rounds. But then I would say that towards the middle of the fight and then going towards the end of it, the fight started to become a lot closer and a lot more competitive. And I found that the rounds which I personally gave Amanda Serrano were a lot closer rounds than the rounds I gave Katie Taylor. There were a couple of rounds within there which were very kind of sort of 50-50 at times for quite big moments of those rounds. But the rounds which Amanda Serrano scored for me, where I said, right, that's a 10-9 round to Serrano, were the rounds which were the closest. What did you make of it?
You know, I didn't score live, and part of that was because, as you probably heard, Netflix had a lot of issues with the stream that night. So it just wasn't possible for me to be able to watch in real time without buffering going on there. That said, I'm glad. I think now that we are 2.5, 3 days later, that these scorecards aren't the main story. I think more people are just talking about what a great fight that was. And that is what I was hoping for, is that these two women, who are two of the best fighters of all time in women's boxing, are having their legacies elevated by fighting in front of, according to Netflix, 50 million people worldwide were, 50 million households were watching them, which means that if you've got two or three or more people on your couch or in front of your computer screen, those numbers are even bigger. So these two women were already the highest paid women boxers ever. Hopefully, for whatever time they have left in the sport, their stature will be elevated even further, because I know that Katie Taylor is 38 years old and Amanda Serrano is 36. I'm just so impressed with the high level, the heart, the guts, the skill at which they both perform in the ring. And I have to give additional credit then to Amanda Serrano. I know that she's moved up and down on the scales over the years, but truly she is a featherweight. And she'd gone up two weight divisions to face Katie Taylor when they fought in 2022. Here she was at 140, more than holding her own. I don't know what is next for them. And I think you and I can get into that shortly. But I would also be happy if all they ever did for the rest of their careers was fight each other.
I was thinking earlier on when I rewatched the fight again that I could genuinely just watch Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano fight every week for a whole year, because I think you could put them in a ring with each other 52 times, and 52 times it'd be exciting bouts. They are just great dancing partners, aren't they, for each other?
They truly are. I think about the fact, I don't know how you are with your friends who aren't into boxing, but I always will show them like Gaddy Ward or Kraus Castillo. And so now, if you ever want to get somebody to buy into the idea of women's boxing, you show them both fights between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano.
You do. You do. It had a bit of everything, just like the first fight did. And like I said to you in last week's show, I felt that in that very, very close fight at Madison Square Garden, that Amanda Serrano just edged it. And this time round, I felt that Katie Taylor edged it. And when I say it had a bit of everything, there was literally a bit of everything. There was some really good skill. There was flurries of punches, punches and bunches. There was some really good technical boxing as well. Katie Taylor was doing some fantastic counter punching, especially as Amanda Serrano came forward. and she would just kind of step off with her lead hook and then follow it up with a right hand over the top, which worked really nicely for her. And then Amanda Serrano was extremely aggressive and just had one motion, which was forward. It was a bit frustrating to hear the commentary team saying that over and over again, that Katie Taylor was deliberately headbutting Amanda Serrano. I don't think that was a case. To be truthful, I don't think that was the case. I think it was a mix up of styles, southpaw versus orthodox. And when you watch the replays in slow motion, you can see that it's just both of them coming in together as they're throwing their shots, and boom, heads come together. Guess what? It's boxing. It happens. It was a nasty cut though, wasn't it? I gotta say, I think if that cut happened under the eyes of the British Boxing Board of Control, I don't think they would have allowed that fight to continue for the length they did.
I completely agree with you. Although, in hindsight, I'm glad that they did let it go so that we could see the fight that we did. But that cut will take time to heal and could potentially affect Amanda Serrano in the future if it doesn't ever heal completely. I think about Israel Vasquez and the eye damage that he had toward the end of his career after his fights with Rafa Marquez, which leads to my question, what next for Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano? And I think the answer for Serrano is that she's going to have to recover. So what next for Katie Taylor?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and there might not be many people who agree with this answer and probably just want more and more because of the exciting fights that Katie Taylor has been in. You just think about people who have completed boxing, and I would put Katie Taylor into that category. She won golds at pretty much every amateur championship on the European stage, which is one of the toughest places to win an amateur championship. She won gold at the World. She won gold at London 2012. She's a multiple time world champion. She's headlined Madison Square Garden. She just fought in front of 70,000 people in an enormous stadium in Texas in front of at least at least 60, 70, 80 million people on Netflix. She's been paid a decent amount of money. Again, I'll fight their corners and say they should be getting paid even more than what they have. But what a career! Like if she decided to hang the gloves up now, I don't think she'd regret it. What about you? What's your gut feeling when it comes to Katie Taylor?
We'll talk about this a little bit more with Kieran later on, but I'm wondering if in lieu of a third fight immediately with Amanda Serrano, we get a third fight with Chantelle Cameron. They did go back and forth with Cameron winning the first fight, close fight, and then Katie Taylor winning the second time around. I feel like there's unfinished business. I don't think that Katie Taylor should move up in weight. The fact that she was getting hurt by Amanda Serrano, and Amanda Serrano is, of course, as skilled as she is, I don't know that Katie Taylor would be able to succeed at 147 against the likes of a Michaela Mayer or a Sandy Ryan. I also don't know that moving up in weight is this late in the career is good for a fighter. I just wonder, though, given the paydays that she's now earning, she's at the peak of her earning potential. Should she retire now, she'd be giving up that kind of those kinds of paydays.
And also, she's 38 years old. No, she's no spring chicken in terms of being a high performing athlete and being in grueling contests like that. I mean, how far do you take it? Like she seems like she's in a good place in terms of her health. I bet she's in a good place in terms of her wealth. She's somebody she's somebody that can step outside of boxing, and she's not going to be. No way is she going to be like Conor McGregor, out partying and buying magnum bottles of champagne. She lives a very simple life. She likes to keep herself to herself, and I'm sure that she'll be comfortable for a very long time. So I wouldn't be bothered if I see her retire. To be truthful.
And maybe the last thing for her to do then would be a little bit of a retirement tour through the UK, through the Europe, to capitalize on her popularity, but to lower that risk reward ratio a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. And do you know what? I had the luxury and the privilege of watching Katie Taylor in my favourite boxing venue in the world, York Hall, which only holds like 1,200 people, and the people in Britain will be very familiar with it. There isn't a bad place to watch boxing in that place. And I watched Katie Taylor fight Jessica McCaskill, and the place was rocking. The Irish came over, they drank all the beer. Literally, York Hall had no beer left at all. And I got to watch her in her proper prime fighting in a venue like that. So it would be great to see her maybe just doing a few of those. Go back to Dublin, have a fight in Dublin, maybe one more in London, and call it a day. But who knows?
It was the lead-in that we needed in into the main event, even had the main event not been the letdown.